After weeks of wandering, Amara finally neared the familiar hills of her village. But this time, she did not run straight to her parents' graves. She had learned a lesson from the cruelty of the villagers. She could not return as the orphaned, beaten girl they had mocked. No, she had to return as someone they would not recognize. Someone who carried power and mystery. She covered herself with a faded shawl, darkened her skin with ashes and mud from the forest, and wrapped her hair under a tattered scarf. She walked slowly into the village, head down, observing everything. Every narrow alley, every market stall, every familiar face. The villagers did not recognize her. Some muttered to one another. "Who is that lady? Never seen her before. She looks strange. Maybe from another village." Amara's lips curved into a faint, secret smile. "They will never know it is me." Not yet, she thought. She began by watching the villagers carefully, learning who had prospered and who had not. She noted the merchants who had mocked her mother, the women who refused to sell her food, the children who ran from her father's hut. Each one became a target in her mind, not out of hatred alone, but as part of a careful, patient plan. She found a small, abandoned stall near the market square. Its roof leaked, and the wooden boards creaked underfoot. It was perfect, hidden enough for a quiet start, but close enough to the crowd. She cleaned it, repaired what she could, and prepared to open her first food stall. Before cooking, she sat alone, whispering to herself. "Papa, Mama. Soon. I will make them pay. I will take back everything they stole from us, our dignity, our happiness, and their fortune." Her hands shook as she opened the calabash of salt. She sprinkled it into the pot with her food, just as the old woman had instructed. The smell rose in a golden haze from the fire. Amara felt power stirring in her chest. Every grain of salt was a step toward revenge. When she first offered food to the villagers, she waited carefully, letting her disguise hide her identity. A man approached hesitantly, curious about the strange lady. "Who are you?" he asked. "Just a traveler, hungry and willing to work," Amara replied softly. He laughed. "Then let me taste your food." "But I doubt you can cook anything good." Amara smiled quietly as he took the first bite. His eyes widened. This is extraordinary. How did you make it taste so?" Word spread quickly. Soon, villagers who had once mocked her family queued at the stall, unaware that the mysterious cook was none other than the girl they had scorned. Days passed, and Amara's reputation grew. Her small, hidden stall became the most popular spot in the village. She cooked every meal with the endless salt, watching carefully as the villagers who had laughed at her mother or father began to experience strange misfortune. A wealthy merchant who had refused Neka food suddenly began losing trade deals. A farmer who had sneered at Okoro saw his crops wither overnight. Children who had mocked Amara's parents fell ill inexplicably. Yet all the while, Amara's disguise kept her identity secret. At night, she returned to the outskirts of the village, near her parents' graves. She whispered to the mounds of earth, "Papa, Mama, I am taking everything from them, just as they took from us. They will know fear. They will know hunger. And they will know me. When the time is right." Her voice was calm, yet her heart throbbed with both triumph and anticipation. Amara did not rush her vengeance. She observed carefully, testing the villagers with each meal. Some came back for more, their hunger overpowering their unease. Each bite from her food slowly carried misfortune into their lives. The disguise allowed her to move freely. She smiled, greeted people, and even helped those who begged, but every favor deepened the effects of the curse. The village slowly began to feel the invisible weight of her power. Some whispered, "Something is wrong. Our fortunes vanish after eating at that girl's stall. Do not cross her. She is not like other people." Yet no one suspected Amara herself. She had learned patience from years of suffering. Her revenge would be complete, precise, and inescapable. Weeks turned into months turned into years. Amara's stall grew into a bustling buka, rivaling the largest vendors in the village. Her fame spread beyond her original home, as travelers and traders came to taste her magical food. But with every new customer, the curse took root deeper. The rich fell into ruin, the poor into despair, and Amara's wealth and influence multiplied. Every night, she returned to her parents' graves. She whispered softly, almost as if confessing to them, "Papa, Mama, look at what I have done. The village will remember us now. Every tear, every laugh, every moment they mocked us. I will repay them all." Even in her victory, she remained careful, patient, and calculating. Her disguise protected her identity, allowing her to grow her power slowly, unnoticed, while her vengeance spread quietly like a shadow over the village. Amara's rise was now unstoppable. The villagers, unaware of her identity, had become completely dependent on her food. They praised her skills, not knowing that every bite carried the weight of their own undoing. She had become a ghost of the girl they once despised, a shadow they could not see, yet could not escape. And as she sat by her parents' graves each night, Amara allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. Revenge was no longer a distant dream, it was unfolding before her very eyes. The village would crumble slowly, carefully, and completely. And only then would they finally understand the cost of mocking a family they had once called cursed. Weeks turned into months. Amara's buka had become the most frequented place in the village, yet she remained a mystery to everyone. Disguised as a stranger, she smiled as villagers praised her cooking, unaware that every bite carried the power of the calabash salt. The magic of the salt was subtle at first. A wealthy merchant who had laughed at her mother's poverty found his trade deals collapsing. A farmer who had mocked Okoro's hard work noticed his crops withering despite careful attention. Families who had scorned her passed from illness to accident to misfortune, almost imperceptibly, until their lives began to unravel completely. Amara watched quietly from the shadows, her disguise hiding her satisfaction. Every success she observed, every moment of despair she witnessed among the villagers, filled her with a sense of vindication she had never felt before. The salt was endless, just as the old woman had promised, and it did not only season her food, it seasoned her vengeance, spreading silently, invisibly, through every household that tasted it. At first, the villagers simply whispered among themselves. "Did you hear? I lost my trading profits overnight. My harvest was destroyed, though I watered and tended every plant. Something is wrong. I feel cursed." The villagers began to grow suspicious of each other. Friends turned into enemies, neighbors eyed one another with distrust. Even those who had not personally eaten from Amara's food felt the ripple of misfortune through their communities. Because misfortune spread like a shadow, and fear made people turn on each other. Amara noted every detail. She memorized who had mocked her parents, who had refused them help, and who had treated her cruelly as a girl. Her vengeance was methodical, targeting those who had caused them pain. A trader who had refused to sell food to Neka suddenly found his wealth disappearing. His finest goods rotted in storage overnight. Another merchant who had laughed at Okoro's failure was forced to sell his possessions for a pittance. Their complaints to each other were fruitless. No one could see the invisible hand that brought them ruin. Amara's buka flourished, the exact opposite. Her food drew people to her stall, yet her wealth grew not from luck, but from the curse's magic. The calabash salt ensured her meals were endless in supply and her customers never questioned the quality. Soon, the effects of the salt became more visible and terrifying. Amara began to realize the extent of the old woman's warning. Failure to ask about the consequences had allowed the magic to operate without restraint. Every act of generosity she performed only amplified the curse. Each time she helped, the problem grew worse, yet the villagers did not connect their suffering to her food. She saw widows crying, fathers begging, husbands blaming each other. The village was fracturing. Social bonds were unraveling. Yet from her hidden vantage point, Amara felt a grim satisfaction. Every insult her family had endured, every humiliation, was now being paid in full. The months passed, and the once innocent grief within Amara hardened into cold, calculating control. Where she had once cried for her parents' deaths, she now smiled as she observed the villagers' struggles. The power of the calabash salt changed her, not physically, but in the deepest corners of her heart. She began experimenting. She prepared meals that would accelerate misfortune for the wealthiest, subtly changing ingredients, adding more salt, cooking with a sharper intention. Each dish was calculated to target those who had most harmed her family. The villagers, oblivious, continued to queue for her food. They praised her generosity, not realizing that their praises only allowed the curse to deepen. Amara reveled in this duality. Publicly helpful, privately merciless. Even those who had shown her kindness as a child, or helped her family occasionally, were affected by the curse simply by proximity. They were caught in the invisible web of magic. Amara understood now. The salt's power did not distinguish between friend and foe if one touched her food. By the time a year had passed, the village was transformed. The wealthy families were impoverished, the farmers' fields lay barren, sickness and death were frequent visitors, and social trust had vanished. People began to avoid one another. No one dared challenge Amara or question her. She remained in her disguise, moving among them like a ghost. She smiled, served her food, and observed. Children who had laughed at her mother now wept at their own home's misfortunes. Parents cursed themselves for ignoring Okoro's cries. Every humiliation inflicted on her family was now returned tenfold. Amara would sit in her buka, watching, and whisper to herself, "See, Papa. Mama. Your enemies suffer. Every tear they caused, every cruel word. I am repaying it all. They will never forget us." Even as she spoke, there were moments when tiny pangs of guilt flickered in her mind. The suffering was vast, indiscriminate, and some innocent people were caught in the chaos. But she pushed the thought away. They cannot know the truth. And this is justice for my family. The calabash salt, endless as the old woman had said, allowed Amara to maintain control indefinitely. She never ran out of food, never lacked ingredients, never faltered in the strength of her curse. Villagers became entirely dependent on her. They would come to her for meals, for guidance, even for assistance, yet every favor deepened the weight of their suffering. Amara began to notice something remarkable. The curse was reactive. The more they praised her, the stronger the misfortune grew. Their attempts to appease her inadvertently fueled her power. She realized she no longer needed to act consciously. The magic worked itself into every corner of the village. She no longer cooked merely to eat or survive. She cooked to enforce the curse, each meal a tool of her vengeance, each morsel a weapon. The village had become her chessboard, and the calabash salt was her unseen hand, moving pieces as she wished. Even with her triumph, Amara's heart was not entirely free. Nights were filled with visions of the villagers' suffering. She saw children crying, parents wailing, merchants losing everything. Sometimes, she felt the weight of the magic pressing back on her, a silent reminder that absolute vengeance comes at a cost. Yet she could not stop. She had committed herself fully, and the old woman's warning echoed faintly in her mind. If you fail to follow the rules, there will be consequences. Amara understood now. Though she had followed the instructions perfectly, she could feel that power itself exacted a price. Every time she used the salt to harm, a fragment of her own innocence, compassion, and humanity faded away. She was no longer the lonely, grieving girl. She was a force, a shadow, a wielder of a curse she could not fully control, yet she did not fear it. She embraced it. Amara, in disguise, observed silently. Her revenge was complete. The village entirely under her control. She had taken everything from those who had taken from her family. Wealth, health, happiness, and peace of mind. And each night, she returned to her parents' graves. She knelt, whispered softly, and let her tears fall. "Papa. Mama. It is done. Justice has been served. Our family will never be humiliated again. They will never forget us. Never." Yet deep inside, a small part of her wondered, have I gone too far? Is this truly justice? Or have I become what I hated? Even with that thought, she smiled faintly. The villagers were hers, the calabash salt was hers, and the vengeance she had longed for as a grieving child had finally been realized. The village was ruined. Fields lay barren, markets had grown silent, laughter no longer echoed in the streets. The once thriving community was now a shadow of itself, consumed by sickness, poverty, and distrust. Amara, still in disguise, walked through the broken streets one morning and noticed something strange. Villagers no longer called out to her eagerly as before. Their eyes were hollow, their bodies weak. Even though they depended on her food, their voices carried no life. The satisfaction that once warmed her heart began to feel empty. That night, she went to her parents' graves. For the first time in years, her words faltered. She whispered, "Papa, Mama, I avenged you. I took everything from them. But why do I not feel at peace? Why does my heart feel heavy?" Tears burned her eyes. In that moment, she remembered the old woman's words, "There will be consequences if you fail to ask about the agreement." Amara froze. Her breath caught in her throat. She had been so desperate for vengeance that day, so blinded by her grief, that she had agreed without hesitation. She had never asked. She had never cared. Until now. With a restless heart, Amara made her way back to the forest. She traveled for days, retracing her steps, carrying the calabash close to her chest. The endless salt was still there, gleaming faintly, whispering of power. But the closer she drew to the place she had first met the old woman, the heavier it seemed to become. The forest felt different now. Darker. The paths twisted as though they were alive, testing her resolve. Strange sounds followed her, whispers in the wind that seemed to echo her own voice. Vengeance is sweet. Vengeance is costly. Finally, after what felt like weeks of searching, she found the small clearing where she had first met the old woman. The same crooked tree, the same air heavy with mystery. And there she was, sitting as though she had never moved, her back bent, her hands busy weaving palm fronds. Amara dropped to her knees, tears streaming down her face. "Mama, please, tell me. What are the consequences of the calabash salt? What price must I pay?" The old woman did not look up immediately. She finished her weaving, tied it neatly, and then fixed her piercing eyes on Amara. Her voice was calm, almost gentle, but carried the weight of hidden storms. "My daughter, you have come late. You agreed without question, and so you walked a path of shadows without knowing where it would lead. Now you wish to hear the truth." Amara nodded desperately. "Yes, Mama. Please. I beg you." The old woman sighed deeply. "The salt is endless, yes. It carries power, yes. It can raise you above your enemies and make you prosper while they fall. But every grain of that salt is not free. Each one carries a soul's worth of fortune. Each time you fed your villagers, you did not just feed their mouths. You fed their lives into the calabash. Their wealth, their health, their peace, their future. All drained into it. And where did it go?" Amara's heart pounded. She whispered, "To me." The old woman nodded. "Yes, my daughter. To you. You carry their fortunes, their blessings, their destinies. That is why you flourished while they withered. That is why your stall grew while their fields rotted. But it does not end there." Amara's voice trembled. "What do you mean?" The old woman leaned closer, her eyes dark and sharp as knives. "You did not ask the cost. The salt does not only take from them. It will take from you too. The more you use it, the more you lose your own soul. Look within yourself. Are you still the girl called Amara, full of tears and compassion? Or are you now a shadow, a vessel of vengeance, hollowed out by bitterness?" Amara staggered backward, clutching her chest. The old woman's words pierced her like spears. She remembered her mother's gentle voice, her father's laughter before the hardships, the innocence she once carried. Could she still find that girl within her? She shook her head violently. "No, no. I only wanted justice. I only wanted them to feel what they made us feel." The old woman's voice softened. "Justice and vengeance are not the same, my daughter. Justice restores balance. Vengeance burns until nothing remains. Look around you. What remains of your village? Nothing but ashes of life." Amara collapsed onto the ground, sobbing. For the first time, the salt in the calabash felt heavy, almost unbearable. She lifted it, staring into its glittering depths, and for a moment, she thought she saw faces. Faces of villagers, faces of children, faces of her own parents, trapped inside, weeping silently. She screamed and dropped it, covering her ears, but the vision would not leave. The old woman rose slowly, her cane digging into the earth. You have two choices, Amara. You can keep the calabash. You will remain powerful, feared, and rich, but you will never know peace. You will grow old and die alone, hollow, with no one to call your own. Or, she paused, her eyes narrowing. You can break it. If you shatter the calabash, the salt will scatter, and the fortunes you took will return to their owners. The village may recover slowly, but you will lose everything you gained. You will return to the girl who had nothing. Nothing but the memory of her parents' love. Amara trembled, her hands shaking violently. The thought of losing her power terrified her. She had worked, planned, and endured so much to see the villagers fall. Could she really let it go? She stared at the calabash. The endless salt shimmered with temptation. Her parents' graves flashed in her mind. The laughter of the villagers echoed in her ears. Then came the silence of her ruined home, the emptiness she now carried. With a broken cry, Amara lifted the calabash high above her head and smashed it against the stone ground. The calabash shattered into countless fragments, the salt spilling into the earth. A wind unlike any other howled through the clearing, rushing across the land as though carrying something unseen back to its rightful place. Amara fell to her knees, exhausted, her body trembling violently. She felt a weight lift from her chest, yet at the same time, a deep emptiness remained. The faces she had seen in the salt faded, vanishing like smoke in the wind. The old woman nodded, her voice low but satisfied. You have chosen well. Perhaps your parents' spirits will rest now. You have paid the price. Amara looked up, her eyes swollen with tears. What will become of me? The old woman turned away, slowly disappearing into the forest shadows. That is for you to discover, child. The salt is gone. What remains is who you truly are. Amara walked back to the village, no longer disguised. Her true face was visible, weary yet free. The villagers, though weak and broken, recognized her instantly. Gasps echoed through the streets. It's her. It's Amara. The cursed child. No. The Avenger. Their voices were mixed with fear, anger, and confusion. But Amara no longer cared. She stood tall, though tears streaked her face. She whispered to herself, Papa, Mama, I tried. Perhaps I went too far. But now maybe we can all begin again. She turned away from the crowd, walking toward her parents' graves. The village behind her would never forget what had happened, but the power of the salt was gone. What remained was only Amara, the girl who had been both victim and avenger, and who now had to face life anew, stripped of vengeance, yet finally free. Moral lesson. Bitterness and vengeance may feel satisfying in the moment, but they always consume the one who carries them. True justice restores balance, while vengeance destroys everyone, including the avenger. No matter how much pain life brings, holding on to compassion and forgiveness is the only path that leads to peace. Sparkles in Amara's case. Her thirst for revenge blinded her to the old woman's warning. She gained power but lost her peace and innocence until she finally gave it up.